to order the special meeting of the River Falls Board of Education. This meeting has been properly notified. Do we have any visitors or delegations who would like to address the board? Hearing none, we will move right into informational items, and I will call on Mr. Lidke to discuss the high school curriculum update, and we'll talk about progress toward aligning our curriculum with equity, inclusivity, and diversity issues. Sure.
Thanks for having me tonight. I don't want to take too much of your time, but essentially, I know that the board, even before our petition that our community put forth, was concerned about equity, inclusivity, and diversity, as were we as a high school staff, and I think even both as a staff as an entire district. One of the things that we're working towards, and we have been for several years, specifically in a few departments, is to bring a more enriching, diverse curriculum into those environments for our students. And I would say that we're in those foundational processes with that, but we also have a lot of work, I would say, in training to do. So one example that I would give is in our English language arts program, we brought in a large amount of diverse curriculum, books, activities that are looking at everything from race, LGBTQ, having BIPOC, various authors, and different perspectives. However, I think one of the things we need to do a better job with still is training our teachers. If I'm being very blunt, we're an all-white staff, and we have to find ways also for our staff to be comfortable in having those conversations and being well-trained and having the professional development with that. One of the things that we did also in our social studies department, per some of the things that are going on, is we talked the very first 2 weeks about Black Lives Matter movement in our U.S. history class. In that, what we did is we tied that all the way back into U.S. history, whether it was our founding fathers, Civil War and Reconstruction, Jim Crow law, and civil rights movement. So our students could understand some of the ideas and the ideals that the Black Lives Matter movement has. Now, for you as a board, you also know, though, that at times we received pushback from that. And so we did receive some pushback from that, where we had a petition that was signed by some of our students. It didn't quite gain any traction. But again, I want you to be aware when we talk about these types of issues that some people deem controversial, we want to make sure that we're transparent with that. Other avenues that we've kind of looked at and worked at would be in talking with our student equity team and our committee that we have. One of the things that we hear resonate with them is not only changing our high school curriculum, but embedding it K-12 so that it is not necessarily something that we're looking at just at our level and our responsibility. It's something that all of our students and teachers should be exposed to in a wide variety of that. So understanding different cultures, different groups of people, all of that is equally important. So our kids understand that the maturity level of where they're at and understanding it now is important, especially in this day and age. But also for us to do that at the elementary and the middle school levels as well too. So we've listened to our students, we're working with that. There is a lot of work to do. The two things that I would say is that we've started to revamp our curriculum. One spot that we've done, and also in social studies, is in our world studies program. That was pretty much a white ethnocentric or European world history perspective. And we're changing that to what a lot of other districts have moved forward with called global issues. So we're talking about something like the industrial age and the industrial revolution, that we can study that from a European perspective where the industrial age currently started. Or we can also talk about developing nations now across the world and their current industrial revolutions and ages that they also have. We want to make sure students have a diverse background and understanding on a wide variety of topics and issues. And our staff are really excited to get into that. But I'll be honest with you too, they're very nervous with that little bit of pushback that we had with that. We need, again, your support. We need to look and listen, and also then train our staff again to be better prepared for those courageous conversations, for those difficult conversations. So one of the things that we're looking at is finding other outside supports and resources for our current staff that we have. And again, also standing up here as a building principal, I would be the first to say that we have to hire more diverse groups of people that are in our classrooms and teaching in our classrooms. So if we're not able to find teachers, we also need to find guest spokespersons and other people that can represent the variety of students and the differences that we have, and understand, again, how empowering that is to have that. Questions or concerns?
Yeah. Can you be a little bit more specific? What do you mean that somebody sent around a petition?
I had a person start a petition on change.org, and I was made aware of it by several students that were concerned about that, meaning that they were not in favor of that viewpoint. And once I talked with Jamie, Mr. Benson about it, and talked with some of our students, just getting a perspective, we had to understand that students have free speech rights. I will be honest that it was started within our building by one of our own students, and I feel like that student didn't have much traction related to that. And I think also didn't really look into the full scope of what the issue or what we were going with. I think with the activity as it progressed, the student understood the why behind it, the why of how we were drawing relationships to what we just discussed about, and understanding the historical perspective of it, and why that's become an important topic to discuss. And so our staff wanted to get out front on that and talk about it because we knew kids wanted to talk about it and understand all viewpoints of that perspective. So once we got into that unit a little bit deeper, I feel like the students or whoever decided to start it removed it for one reason or another. We didn't go in and, I'll be honest, we didn't go in and seek out who that was. We didn't go in and try to censor that student. That's not our job. Those students have individual rights as well too, and we respect those opinions.
I think it would be fair to say the specific topic, was it not about Black Lives Matter?
Correct.
And by sheer coincidence, I happened to have visited some classrooms and stepped into a classroom where this conversation, English, right?
We had it both in English and we had it in U.S. history.
The topic was being discussed that I witnessed as what's the context of what does Black Lives Matter mean to you? What does it mean to other people? It was just talking about some of the history of when did this start? That phrase isn't that old. There was conversation about Colin Kaepernick taking a knee in NFL football. It was context, and it was about dialogue and discussion. It definitely was not what I personally witnessed pushing any singular viewpoint on anybody. But again, that was one lesson, not the entire unit, but that's a part of that's essentially what generated this mini petition that was generated by one of the students.
Yes, Casey.
Well, one of the things that I think about is the fact that when we look at knowledge that we are trying to help our students gain and work within and learn, there will always be things that are left out. We can't teach everything. The challenge has been that for too long, we have left out the things that don't look like people like us. So we have to right that wrong. And I would say it's for very important reasons that are aligned to equity, inclusivity, and diversity. But even beyond that, it's a matter of academic integrity, of why we are trying to broaden the number of ideas, the span of ideas that we are introducing our kids.
Very much so. I completely agree.
I think it's really important work.
And again, we'd be happy to give more updates as we move through that work with some of our curriculum work that we'll be doing and some changes. A lot of what we're doing is unit structure, so you're not necessarily going to see a brand new course put forward here in January. We're actually reworking some of the work within the context that we have. And if we make large curriculum changes as to a whole new course or new adoption or graduation requirements that bring a diversity component, you will be the first to hear that.
But the other reason why I bring this up is I think that how we talk about this is really important. Because there will be people who will misunderstand if we leave it at aligning our curriculum to these priorities. What we really are doing is looking at the academic integrity of what we are doing with our kids. And hopefully that helps people to understand the issue with more complexity and
Very much so.
understanding.
I was just going to touch a little bit on, the point you made about, it's difficult for the teachers, and I guess I would probably feel, put myself in that same category, not as a teacher, but just somebody who wouldn't feel terribly qualified to speak intelligently about a view, for something that I personally haven't experienced or dealt with or been exposed to a lot. So whatever we can do to try to support that in terms of, additional training, or like you mentioned, people coming in, I think that would be good too. I worry that we could try to do something like this, and the population that feels maybe most disconnected might not feel like what was done resonated with what they would have hoped to have done either. And so it's difficult to say, yeah, we're trying to incorporate some of these things, but if we don't do it the right way, it could actually make it worse too. So if there's ways to support that, I'd certainly be open to seeing those too.
Our student EIP committee is really passionate about that too, and they're willing to help. And they're the first to admit that they're not experts either. None of us are.
Yeah.
But if we don't have the courage to have those conversations with the adults and the teachers and our students and understanding that, and outside perspective, outside River Falls, outside this area, we're not going to grow and we're not going to get better. And what I mean by growing and getting better is having a wider perspective in terms of where we are at and understanding our greater world and context.
Yeah. How you mentioned the teachers are a little apprehensive, just on a fairly sensitive subject. How was it received by maybe the majority of the students outside of the example that you shared?
Extremely positive,
Okay.
honestly. So these are the conversations that our students want to have. This is what we talk about with high engagement and the topics of which they are. And again, we're a very open school, I feel, when I talk to our students and things, but we have a long way to go. We have a lot of kids from diverse backgrounds that feel very comfortable here, but it doesn't mean that we should just sit on that and be okay with that. We need to look at, again, our systems and our structures and making sure that we can get better at those. So again, it was very well received by our students, and a welcome change to the norm of what would have been in some of these classes.
Sure.
I think, Kit, I like the direction we're moving in. It's hard to go in this direction given the pandemic and everything else, but a couple of things. One is, I think part of what you're saying and hearing, I'm certainly hearing it, and I don't have sample sizes like others do from our alumni and our current students, that River Falls School District has not prepared me for the workforce. This is workforce development work when we're doing it here. If our students are going to work outside of River Falls, they need to be prepared to work in a society and with others in a workforce that don't look like River Falls,
Right.
and don't act and don't talk like River Falls. Not dramatically different, but the United States has always been and continues to be a very diverse country. We just happen to be a fairly homogeneous community here in River Falls. And it's not a ding on River Falls from the standpoint that makes us bad, but that means that we have to compensate for certain things that our students don't get here, but they're skills that they need to succeed in the workforce if they're going to leave this community, or eventually what's going to catch up with this community. It's going to be a very diverse world, or what I call, you said, to be blunt, we're all white here. I think to be obvious, we're all white here. That's not any big epiphany. We are. However, to move in this direction, it's not just an issue of race and ethnicity. It's not just an issue of skin color. The diversity we're really talking about here and the exposure to broader issues isn't obvious on the surface. So there's lots of ways in which, when we do our hiring guest speakers, as you talk about the issues that are introduced here, that will come from different perspectives. So I think it's important for us. I think we all agree with this, but I'd like to put this out there once in a while. This is more than just racial, isn't it? I think. And it's not about, I hope to be here on this board on the day in which this isn't a major initiative, but this is just the way we do stuff, right?
Yeah.
And that we accept this is integrated into the community. It's not a big, special, important issue that suddenly we got to push on. This is just academic integrity, which is what Stacy was talking about. This is the way the rest of the world is. So I think that from my standpoint, we need to think about this as much as a workforce development issue and how we train our students and teach our students to succeed in the larger world out there, than just that this is something that they need to know generally. So that resonates with some people who are resistant. We've got to prepare you to work in the workforce and work with people that you aren't familiar with.
This would be across the different curriculum areas, right? We would see this infused in different areas.
Right, so that's what was my next steps, is that it just doesn't fit in social studies and language arts. We have to go far beyond that, and that's increasing that level of comfort level, increasing that level of awareness and the teachable moments and opportunities in curriculum instruction and assessment. So again, we're at the tip of the iceberg in that, and we have a lot of work to do with our team. And we're excited to do the work because, again, the activities and the units of study that we have put forth already this year, we're seeing higher levels of engagement because of that. These are the things that our adolescents want to learn more about, and we can draw relationships regardless of the author's skin color and other things throughout that. And it's good conversations that we're having with our kids and with our staff, and we're better for it.
I'm really happy to see this. Is the when conversations like this, like with the Black Lives Matter that Jamie was referring to, do the staff members get together and kind of decompress, and because that can be stressful, right? To facilitate those conversations, you don't know where they're going to go.
Yep.
Sometimes, do they get together afterwards?
Our 2 U.S. history teachers planned this entire unit together, and then when we had a little bit of When I heard that there was a bit of angst with the petition that was created, we sat down as a team, and we again looked at what we were presenting. We analyzed again where we were at. I assured them that our board supports this kind of conversation within its context of historical context and understanding the levels of either systematic racism and other things related to that particular topic, and they can go back historically and look at it. So when we presented it in that form and they knew they were on solid footing, just being reassured, things were much better.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Carry on.
Thanks.
We'll talk at a future board meeting. When we got struck with COVID, I had mentioned, I think at our last meeting, that we never came back to revisit the community survey that was conducted basically last winter. We got the finalized results about the 1st of March, and then COVID came in. But in reviewing, just to connect part of what our community told us to this conversation that Kit presented, that there was a question on the survey about how valuable do you as a community member feel as though it's important for us to educate around issues of respect and appreciation of diversity in our society. And 91% of some 1,500 surveys that were returned indicated that it was either very valuable or valuable that we embed that in our school system. And so we are representing what our community wants us to do with this kind of work.
Thank you. So now we'll move on to informational item letter B, and this will be learning environment updates for the e-school, for the hybrid grades 7 to 12, as well as our in-school students in pre-K through 6, and that will be Jennifer and principals.
So just to introduce a little bit about that, the board has asked that we continue to provide you with an update. We essentially have 3 learning environments going on. With our K-6 kiddos all coming to school 5 days a week, 7-12 in that hybrid, and then well over 300 students in the virtual. So this is just intended to give a update to the board regarding what's the pulse, where are we at, how are we doing? And so I'll just jump in real quick to say that Jennifer and I have had conversation regarding some of the difficulties we've had with the virtual e-school, the software program, I will call it. And Jennifer and I talked with the parent company, several of their team members, and she has, before my involvement, communicated regularly about some of the problems that we're experiencing. One obvious is a student would be working on their platform and the system shuts down. And so we've had a repeated series of trying to work with them to get some improvements where we'll see, the proof will be in the pudding. If in fact by Monday, we're supposed to see some quote unquote dramatic improvements in not having those kind of system shutdowns. That would eliminate not all, but several of the concerns that we have had to date. I don't know, Jennifer, do you want to add anything else about the virtual piece?
Well, I'd say 6 weeks in now, one of the things that we're starting to hear from our kiddos, from our teachers, and from families is we miss the social interaction. So continuing to provide opportunities for students to have those homeschool connections are some of the things that we're working on. So on Fridays for those whole group meetings, the principal might jump in and meet with the kids for that 30-minute period of time, do an activity with them. Our library media specialists, our school counselors, or other specialists within the buildings, continuing to give those students opportunities to connect with their homeschool and remember the people that they've historically seen, many of them for years previously. Rocky Branch this week, I don't know if you've seen it in the updates or if you've seen it on some posts on social media as well here with the district Facebook page. They had their second social this particular week. Both Mrs. Smith and Mrs. Young-Ferreira got all of their kids, invited their families out. They did a little art project where they painted some pumpkins, did a few activities, and we had a real nice little social gathering. It was beautiful again last Wednesday. So it was a great opportunity for families to just connect with some other families. We followed all of DHS and district guidelines for social distancing and masking. The kids did a really great job, and it was really fun to see them out there interacting again. They love getting to see their teachers, and our paraprofessional was there providing a lot of support as well. So just kudos to that team at Rocky Branch for again really opening up and creating some opportunities for some social interactions, which is something that our kids historically need and want on a regular basis. As Jamie mentioned, we're still working through some of our platform issues with technology outages and so forth. But really to update you in the spirit of continuous improvement, we want to get better. And the staff are really working to continue to brainstorm and find better ways to communicate information to parents, to find a better work balance load with our students, and to collect input and then to act on it. So with that being said, we've done a team survey for parents. We've allowed parents to provide some feedback. And of course, as you can guess, the number one thing that comes back as a frustration on that survey was the system has to stop going down. And so that's something that we hope we can get rectified sooner rather than later, as Jamie said. And then something that we hear from both the students as well as the parents is just truly looking at the workload. And students have had to make a big transition. This is new for a lot of people to transition to that virtual environment where now they don't have a teacher talking to them, but they have lessons to read, videos to watch, and they have to learn that whole new modality of learning. And then another thing that parents mentioned was it's just more staff. They'd love for our teachers to have more time with their kids. Synchronous instruction would be great, but we struggle with that in our other models too, is to what do we provide for our students. Our teachers meet in whole group meetings with our students. They may meet in small group meetings at the grade levels, unique grade levels, and they also meet in one-on-one time. And so we're continuing to talk about the feedback and the lessons and the reteaching opportunities that we can do in those environments. But there's always some kids who, would love to have that face-to-face instructor there more. So we appreciate your actions and your support for increased staffing. Because that was something that came out loud and clear as parents said, if we had more staff, the teachers would have more time with our kids. And so that's really what we're looking at, being able to kind of do. Besides just the survey, I've taken the opportunity to contact several of the parents as well by phone to try to get even deeper into some of the comments and some of the concerns. And so that's been a really good opportunity to go deeper, to get more feedback from them, to explain a few things, and to try to get even more clarity in action steps that we can take to make this a better program moving forward. I've also started meeting with some small groups of students to provide feedback, and really had that opportunity to meet with some great kids who not only came with some concerns, but came with really good recommendations on how we can make this better as a team. Things that kids could do, things that teachers could do, things that the administration could do, and how we could make it better. Even more social engagement, looking at the fun things. What can we recreate in our virtual media school that they do in the brick and mortar buildings, like character council at Westside, or a student council, or a spirit week. Things to make kids feel more connected. So, today was a great day with in-service to give our teachers time to really work on it. They've done a great job listening to some of the feedback and continuing to modify our courses within Odysseyware. So we know and we're hopeful that as we're moving into the end of this first term, in term 2, we know that there's a lot of great things out there. We're just crossing our fingers that we can get our platform connectivity issues resolved, because we know that that will go a long way with our families. So.
Question?
Can I just say that you guys have done a really great job of getting this going in the right direction. It's hard with some of the technology things that have happened, but the things that you have control of and that our teachers have control of, I feel like you guys are moving it in the right direction, and I really appreciate the time and effort you guys have put into it. So just know that I think a lot of the issues are technology based, not teacher administrative. I think you guys are doing a great job with where you're going right now. So thank you for your time and commitment to that, because I know it's been a rough road.
I just was going to ask real quick. I don't know that this has ever come up, at least that I've been part of the discussion in terms of the Odyssey, where what we were promised or what we purchased. I mean, I can't imagine they were prepared 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 months ago to be inundated with places like us creating 370 kids in a virtual school. And I think some of them are on the younger program, but the same way that we're saying, and I'm not making excuses for them, I'm just saying it would be hard for me to imagine if I'm sitting in the room at Odysseyware that they're not asking for that same grace that we were with. We didn't see this coming 4 months ago. This was not built to be for every district, and maybe we were promised something other than what we're getting. It occurs to me that maybe we need to, I don't know that makes it any easier. It just would be hard for me to imagine they saw all this coming too, in terms of the user traffic and demand that they're getting now. So
They were pretty transparent about that with us.
Okay.
They weren't denying that problem,
Yeah.
and which we appreciated that recognition. At the end of the day, we also expect that they can promise on, or that they can deliver on their promise. And like I said, we were told that no later than Monday, there should be some significant improvements related to their hardware, infrastructure, capabilities, and so on.
Okay. I'll be curious to hear what comes of that. I mean, and I would hope for honest feedback too, because if we gave them some leeway and said this is what we're hoping for, we understand there might need to be some time to get it worked out on your end, and we're not getting it, then that might lead the direction of where you'd go in the future. But I find myself kind of just thinking that from time to time. Not that it makes it any easier for anyone here, but they're looking at it the same way I'm sure we were in terms of demand, a surge.
How about if we jump to case 6, 5 days a week, how's it going? Yeah, I think in case we have some listeners, they'll hear you a little better.
Okay. Well, thanks for having us tonight. I gathered a few pieces of information that I thought maybe you would be interested in. First of all, normally at Greenwood we have around 400 students face-to-face, and this year right now we have about 330 The remaining students are part of the virtual school, so that'll give you a perspective of what we're working with. That's really been good for us at Greenwood in terms of helping us with our spacing and school safety. It's been a real benefit for our teachers. I thought you might be interested in some data related to attendance, given that we're faced with COVID right now. We're averaging about 15 student absences a day because of COVID-related issues. Not always because the students have COVID symptoms. About 7 of those 15 would be student COVID symptoms. The 6 would be related to families. And then there might be a couple other that are due to close contacts that they've had. I would say that our families are doing a great job monitoring at home. We did early on in the year have a number of situations where we were having to go to rooms, check in on kids, talk with them, take temperatures, and then decide if we needed to go to the COVID room, which we call our wildcat waiting room is what we call it. And we haven't had to do that as much anymore because our parents are really doing a great job of monitoring at home and calling us, communicating with us related to symptoms rather than sending their kids to school. So that's been a real positive too. We're very happy to be face-to-face. We're hopeful that we can continue with face-to-face throughout the duration of the year. Our face-to-face time is not met without some challenges. There's a lot of new happening, a lot of extra work is being placed on our teachers, whether that's meeting kids on the playground in the morning, figuring out how to work mask breaks into their daily routine, cleaning the classrooms, picking kids up from lunch, and the list goes on, teaching social and emotional lessons, preparing for distance learning. We had a nice practice distance learning day today. So there's a lot happening that's new for our teachers. And I know I can speak for Chuck and Chris and Nate, our teachers have handled it like true professionals. They're fantastic. They're awesome. We're trying to pay attention as best we can to make sure we're supporting them any way possible during this time. So that's my update, but I'd be happy to answer any questions or turn it over to Chuck.
John, I just wanted to add a few things. You'll find a lot of similarities between the schools that we had in River Falls. I have about 380 students, down from about 440, 450. And some of the feeling in the school, with fewer students, it's just easier to transition. I would also say that we're not having as many referrals to the office or bus referrals, so that's good. But as when Amy came in and was walking the hallways, I was interviewing students one-on-one, called our minute meetings, and I would say somewhere 90 to 95% of the students respond to this question: what were you looking forward to when you came back to school? 90 to 95% of our students said friends, looking forward to being back with friends. And so I think that is a testament to the connections that their friends have, but the teachers have in our schools. We did our data meetings today. As expected, some of our students aren't performing up to a regular year level, but being face-to-face means a lot. They felt across the board that those gaps could be addressed in short order and that they did not feel that they were going to have a significant long-term delay on students' education. So there's a really good feel at our school. I think there's a little bit of nervousness because it's the unknown of knowing how COVID is going to, when it's going to strike. But we keep saying, we're doing well. We're doing well. We don't have a lot of students out of our schools due to COVID, either in their families or themselves. We all know that can change depending on context, but the overall feeling is really good at our schools. I'll entertain any questions if you have anything specific.
I have a question. Has the face covering compliance been better than we thought it might be with the younger kids?
I would say yes, but I had summer school at Greenwood this year, and it was fantastic there. So I was hopeful that would carry on, and it's been great. We have our biggest issue has been this.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, you know, it just slides off their face and we remind them to pull it up above their nose. We went to a lanyard system for them holding onto their mask a few weeks into the year. Plastic baggies, so when they're outside or when they're at lunch, they can stuff it right into the bag and continue to play, and then they have it right on them. There doesn't have to be that extra transition of going and picking it up from over here and now carrying it over there, and that's been a huge help for us.
And with the number of students that are out, I'm just guessing, I mean, it's not astronomical, but the extended times they're out, are the teachers doing okay supporting those students when they're out, or can they even do that at the elementary level?
We utilize kind of almost a vacation approach. You know, yes, the teachers are being able to meet their needs, you know, 10 days, 14 days, some of them a couple a little longer than that. So it's not been huge, but I would also say that they're worried about that. You know, they're worried that an extended illness, what does that do to a student? And as the rest of the class progresses, where when they fit back in, it's a little trying.
Most of our absences have been in the 2 to 4 day window. So the kids might have symptoms, they're at home. A lot of our families are going out and getting those tests and the symptoms are going away and they're getting the kids back in short order. We've only had a couple students, 2 or 3 maybe, that have been out for the 2-week or the 14-day deal. That's harder. Cindy, if it's a couple days, it would be like Chuck said, normally during the year, if you're out for a couple days, we're going to get you caught up when you get back. Don't worry about it, get healthy. When it's a couple weeks, we have to work a little bit harder to make sure that we're sending things home. And there's a process every time we send a student home due to COVID-related symptoms. Their laptop goes home, their main math or reading manual or journals go home, and we say, stay tuned, we'll check in a couple days, mom or dad, and we'll send you messages about what work to do electronically through either Seesaw or Google Classroom via email. We see how it's going a couple days, then we start sending things home.
Yeah, it's been very minimal, those long absences at our schools. Yeah, so we're hopeful.
Yeah, hopefully that'll continue, because that would be tough, right? If you had a lot of students that are out and teachers had to support that too.
Okay. I would assume that if we have a lot of students out, that would trigger something else that the board would have to do.
That's a good point.
I have 2 questions, and the first one is, I just wanted to have a sense of what the burden is for teachers, a little bit more in terms of what's been the hardest thing, or what is your sense about how the teachers are faring? That's the first thing. The second thing is, I'm curious, Chuck, about your statement that discipline issues have gone down. Is that proportionate to the number of students that we have in school, or what do you attribute that to?
I think it's proportionate to some of the students that we have in school. So fewer students overall is going to minimize that somewhat. I just think a lot of it has to do, they're really happy to be there. We're doing lots of things like on the playground, for example, we have the zones of recreation going on, where normally we would, so normally we'd have lots of kids playing and someone bumped into me and it creates another issue. You get fewer kids, bumping into each other, they're separated by classes in the school, so there's some things that we might attribute to, fewer discipline issues, but I don't think we know 100% that any one of those is the biggest contributor, but they're all contributing to the lower number.
Assigned seats in the lunchroom is one. Classroom cohorts on the playground, I think, is a big thing. So the sense of classroom community is stronger, I think, this year than it has been to this point, because that's who kids get. The 5 athletes from this classroom and the 5 athletes from this classroom and the 5 athletes from this classroom aren't making an 8-on-8 football game where we're really super competitive and worried about who's going to win the Super Bowl at recess. So we're steering clear of those scenarios, and we're making new friends and playing with kids that we might not otherwise. It's really been a positive thing. Extra spacing in the lunchroom, the way that we've worked hard to have extra tables to have kids not sitting right on top of each other, has also helped with behavior-related issues.
I think there's also concentration on our behavior transitions, our bathroom etiquette, our etiquette in the lunchrooms, those types of things that we're constantly working on so that we're social distancing, we're keeping kids' hands clean, and all those things contribute to just a different feel.
Well, amidst all of the tremendous challenges that we've been enduring this year, I'm really anxious to find those things that present us opportunities of new things, new structures that can actually make some positive contributions that we might even consider for learning going forward. We've learned this about how this works at recess and we're going to incorporate it. We have to find those silver linings someplace.
Yeah, there's a lot of good going on, there's no doubt about that.
I do have a question or comment. I'm kind of worried about any of the kids that are kind of being left behind. Is there anybody that you know of, this is across the board, that just hasn't responded at all, distance learning or in person? Have we lost kids that we just haven't heard from?
I don't think we really know about distance learning with our brick and mortar schools yet. We've done some practicing, and students weren't expected, because it was a non-student day, they weren't required to attend that, but a lot did. So we're practicing that. As far as the engagement versus last spring, we don't know everything about it, but we do know that we're much better at the delivery. We have more information to parents. Parents are more comfortable with interacting that way. So we expect a higher degree of engagement as we go forward. We just don't know the full extent of that yet.
Stacy, you mentioned the burden, and we didn't really touch on that. And I think there's a number of things going on. First of all, our kids are coming back to us after not having been in school for 6 months. There are some learning gaps. There are some social emotional gaps. We always have those, but they're greater than what they have. So teachers are concerned about the academic and social and emotional well-being of their kids. That's a heavy burden that people who care so dearly about their kids carry with them each and every day. I think that's one thing. I think all of the new routines and procedures that we have in place are heavy even for the most veteran teachers to try and keep track of, be reminded of, stay on top of, and that compresses the day. So you add breakfast, you add a mask break, you add a pickup on the playground or a delivery to the cars at the end of the day. That just makes your day that much shorter, makes it feel like it's going that much faster. So we're trying to do everything that we can in our power to look for ways to mitigate those issues. Our day today was a good example. Practice distance learning day, data day. Take the time the rest of the day for yourself to do what you need to get taken care of, to catch yourself up. Friday early release days, same things. Minimizing duties as much as we can by having rotations, same kinds of deals. Just being there for support and encouragement is really, really important. And I think we're doing okay. It's hard. Some days are harder than others, but I think we're hanging in there. Like I said, you can't say enough about the way that our staff has handled themselves, the courage that they've taken, and how hard they're working is very commendable.
That is terrific to hear, and I'm anxious to hear about the Fridays, hoping that provides another, over time, some other collaboration. Good. Thank you.
7:12. Going to be a bit of a segue, I would say, if we're following the agenda where info B, continuing, we heard virtual update, we heard elementary update, we're now going to hear middle school. And the segue is some of this will also lead us into C on the informational item as we kick around some options for considering whatever kind of shift or pivot we may take. And so I'll add to the dialogue here in a minute, but you guys go ahead.
Before we jump into the 7-12 hybrid, I didn't get a chance to talk about 6th grade because they're part of the face-to-face. Just real quick, recognizing our 6th grade staff doing a great job with the face-to-face every day. I think we made the right decision bringing the 6th graders back. It hasn't been easy. Kids come into the building at 7:10. We had a bump back our bus, so getting a little bit earlier. Kids go in the classroom right away. That means teachers don't have that little time to prep in the morning. You got kids in there. That's hard. But if you ask them, I think they'd much rather be face-to-face than teaching the hybrid that our 7-12 teachers are doing, because it's a whole different level of complexity to that. So I think in general, the one positive of all things, we take a lot of mask breaks, and how important it is for sixth graders to get outside and move it's been kind of one of those blessings that next year, if hopefully we're out of this, that we would take more breaks with our sixth grade students, get them moving more. So that's been good. I think there's going to be some unique challenges coming up. We have some close contacts in sixth grade that's going to be difficult and challenging to do some of that distance learning. We do have Schoology, but it's still not the same as having a face-to-face instructor. So those are some unique challenges as well. In terms of our hybrid, I think this image does a really good job demonstrating, sharing, or showing all the different variables when we look at a hybrid model. And I feel like if you take one of these boulders and remove it, or put a bigger boulder in this place, it's going to offset the balance. And so as we look at this hybrid model, these are the things that I think are really impacting a lot of our decisions. It's the balance between student learning and mitigation. It's the impact of our teachers having to teach in 3 different worlds and deliver instruction. It's students having to learn in 3 different worlds. It's the social and emotional well-being of our staff and students. And of course, the mitigation, health and safety of our community. So these are things that we're really balancing. So any of these decisions, right now we're in the current hybrid model, and I'll just give you a quick refresher, and so we'll get here in a minute. But if we do pivot at any point, we definitely have to be mindful of how any of these changes positively and negatively impact students, staff, and families. So just a real quick refresher where we're at with our hybrid. A through K attends Monday, Tuesday, L through Z, Thursday, Friday. There's a synchronous distance learning day where it's face-to-face virtually with our students on Wednesday. And then the distance learning asynchronous the days when the kids aren't in school. In terms of core classes, our students see our core teachers once per week for 88 minutes. They see their exploratory teachers twice per week for 44 minutes. And then they have their band, choir, or PE for only 44 minutes a week. So those are some unique challenges. There have been some positives with the hybrid model to this point. One, we believe we've had really successful mitigation. We've had minimal positive COVID cases, fewer than 5 at Meyer Middle School. And just a real quick shout out to our 6th grade teachers. When we had to do contact tracing in our 6 Blue House, our teachers not only had the kids cohorted, but they had it cohorted by seating charts in each of their classes where those kids sat at each of their classes together. It took us less than 25 minutes to do contact tracing because of their organization. So again, I just want to recognize that 6 Blue team. They did a fantastic job with that. Contact tracing, as mentioned, has been less problematic within the hybrid model. And then the smaller class sizes, we've had some benefits with that, relationship-wise with our students, teachers, and then ability to personalize and provide feedback has been a lot better with a smaller class size. Quite a few challenges, like everybody in this room, and I think nationwide, we're concerned with content coverage. It's not the same, not being face-to-face. Math has been particularly challenging. We have a brand new math curriculum, way more rigorous than we've ever had at Meyer Middle School. Those kids are getting 88 minutes face-to-face, that's it, per week. That's challenging. Attendance on Wednesday, this past Wednesday, we had 15 7th graders completely checked out. We had 14 8th graders who did not attend one session. So we met with those students individually. I had a conversation with what's going on. You know, are there things we can support you with? Did you just decide to check out? Is your Wi-Fi not working? You mentioned, have we had any kids check or just completely disengaged? We had one student that we had to go do a home visit. So Officer G and Brian Buck went out to the home and did a home visit, but that's the only one that's been completely disengaged since the start of the year. Timing of our virtual learning day has been cumbersome at first. I think it's getting better. I think our staff is adjusting to that Wednesday because what happens is you have a group of students for 2 days, you teach them, and then you have another group of Thursday and Friday kids that you haven't taught yet. We're expected to do some sort of lesson on Wednesday, which is the timing of it is challenging. I think the biggest challenge for our teachers is teaching in 3 different worlds. It's really tricky because you're doing face-to-face, you're in person, you're doing a Wednesday face-to-face virtually, and then you do distance learning and then you flip it midweek. That's challenging. And the common theme you'll see, I shared with you a survey that we sent out on Friday last week, asking 3 questions. What's going well with hybrid? What are the challenges with the current hybrid? I gave them some options for different hybrid options. And then if you had to pick a different hybrid, what would it look like? But the common theme is and the feedback that we got was that more time is needed to prep in order to do all 3 of these really well. So, and then last is student organization. Because we're dealing with early adolescent brains. It's, I think, tough for some adults to stay organized, but for a middle school kid to stay organized with 3 different learning platforms or 3 different ways to learn has been really challenging. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kit.
I would just echo what Mark has talked about just a little bit, and both Nate and Chuck as well. We've got many blessings that have come from this hybrid model. Lots of great things have come. I would also echo that student discipline is nearly non-existent, honestly, at the high school. It's been exceptional. I think our kids, again, simply want to be back in school, and they're mindful of it, and they're intentional why they're here. And a lot of those processes that we're doing, kids are just thankful to be in school, even if it's just 2 days a week. Our teachers are working. I just can't even put words to how hard they are working and the sacrifices they're making to make this work. Mark talks about 3 levels of different teaching. I think there's a 4th now. At our building, we have 94 kids out right now due to contact tracing and then some. So now we have a 4th element of all of those students too that they're checking and connecting with and trying to on a personal level. It's just not easy as flipping a switch and making it happen online. They're really, really working hard. Again, our current hybrid model is very similar to obviously Meyer Middle School. Again, we have 2 cohorts with Wednesdays in between. That modified schedule is available as a link for you in the PowerPoint as well. When talking with teachers and things, again, it's wonky. It's a little bit of a disconnect on Wednesdays is what we're hearing from teachers, and the fact that one cohort of kids is 2 days ahead of the other cohort, and to try to have a meaningful lesson or dialogue on a topic or an issue is difficult when the other students aren't there yet, or when the other students feel like it's review instead. So our teachers are really struggling with that, and they feel like it's in actuality almost a separate prep because it's not really fitting within the course. Some of our staff are doing it more project-based or topical-based, but then other teachers are still trying to draw connections within the unit. And I think the one that creates the greatest stress for our staff is that Wednesday of what they're planning and preparing for. On our student side of things, our students will say that the digital or the e-lessons, I think, are creating a greater deal of stress. They feel like there's a lot more front loading in it and a lot more upfront work. And I'll use an example. If I struggled in geometry as a high school student, and it wasn't the easiest course for me. But if I have 2 days of assignments and I can't get over that first hurdle of understanding why the problem or the context is there, but yet I can't contact my teacher because they're teaching a whole nother cohort of kids face to face, I'm stuck. And you get frustrated, or kids in some cases are getting frustrated on those digital e-lessons. So we're trying again to work with staff to understand what needs to be supported and what doesn't, but that's not going to work in a cohort of 30 with diverse learners. That's not always going to be perfect, where we think something's going to go well, but the reality is it may or may not. And so asynchronous lessons and synchronous, we're kind of learning by doing in that. Again, positives and negatives, we talked about a little bit of this. The first I would say is that we're seeing our kids in person. That's the 3rd down on the positives. Social, emotionally, and instructionally, our kids want to be here. They really do. And they appreciate every moment that they have with our teachers, and our teachers likewise appreciate the moments with our students. Our tracing in our cohort model for the size of our building, by having 550 students in 2 cohorts, has been huge for us. When we have a tracing incident or somewhere we have to go back, we're able to do it in a very sound manner and not have any cross-contamination at this particular point in time. So it makes it really efficient for us and safe for our students and our staff. Few of any of our positive cases as a positive are within our classroom environment. As you've heard throughout the week, we have some activities and things that we're kind of taking a hiatus for. But for the most part, again, we've had fewer contact tracings within the building itself as opposed to related to outside environments, not just school activities, but just outside in general. Our failure rates, this is a data point for you. We looked back and we talked about it as our BLT. And I think we're hyper focused on it. So a good thing that's come from both last spring and this fall is looking at disengaged students, whether it was online or whether it's here face-to-face or whatever it might be. We found that our failure rates from term 1 last fall are exactly the same percentage or very close to the same percentage in this hybrid model. So that says to us that what we're doing in terms of some mitigations with disengaged kids and other things is working. But I know we're very hyper focused on that and making sure that we're finding every which way to contact and work with those students and families. Again, we talked about some of the challenges already that we have. Again, Wednesdays, again, we discussed that. And again, staff and students trying to find that balance of work with a 5-day gap. Again, if a student is in that, they're having class face-to-face till on Tuesday. Wednesday is a synchronous day, and then they're out until the following Monday. And that 5-day gap for some of our students on a holistic wide of levels is a concern. One would be, I have 2 high school age students myself. My sons know when it's face-to-face days and when it's not. Guess what happens at the time to go to bed on non-face-to-face days? Our kids' rhythm of going to bed is off holistically as high school students right now. We see our kids kind of dragging through even more so on face-to-face days, or just going to work later than they could or should because they know they can. And that's not healthy either. So not just instructionally, we're seeing students on a whole different level out of sync in a normal routine. And that's starting to kind of show itself. Staff burnout for us is pretty high. I don't want to say it's high in the fact that they're ready to give up by any means, but we do need to make sure that we're being very mindful of at our building level with the 3 modalities and the 4th that we described, along with having our teachers now cover on our preps with substitutes. So this week alone, we have 3 teachers that are teaching virtually from home because they're a close contact in a quarantine. And I have staff who are then covering those teachers' classrooms, making sure our students are supervised while that other teacher is teaching. Again, some of the shortage of subs that we have, our staff are doing a masterful job with that, but they need that valuable prep time, and we're trying to find different ways to fix that and work with them on that. This week, I have a traveling office, so tomorrow I know I'm going to be working and helping cover some of our teams and our staffs just because we can't continue to ask our teachers to do so. The other challenge I think we have in this is still we're only delivering what we feel in a 4-day week or true curriculum because that Wednesday is not really putting together. We're not worried about the curriculum delivery and that we've boiled down our essential standards and we're getting to that, but it still is meaningful for us to have 5 continuous days of instruction and routines for our kids and making sure that we can work through those. So we have many, many great things that are going on. Again, our staff would say, we are so glad, though I can't tell you how many times we've heard that we're so happy to be with our kids in any format that resolves with some face-to-face contact instead of being fully online for a variety of reasons, but we know this is the hardest one to be working in.
So at this point, reflecting on the different hybrid models, I know Kid has had more conversations with his staff about these different options, at least with your BLT team, right?
Both schools, yeah. Both BLT staff.
Our staff has not had deeper conversations about this, but I did send a survey out, as I mentioned, and you can see those results there. So these are conversations, deeper conversations I'm going to be having with my staff at our team meetings on Tuesday. But with everything else, you take a look at where you've been, where we are, and where we're going. I'm not sure where we're going yet, but these are some different options reflecting on some of the positives and negatives. The top one is an AD model. So you rotate kids every other day. There's some positives to that. There's also some concerns and challenges to that. The second week is an AABB with basically the same thing we're in right now, except we're moving that virtual day to a Friday. The positives, better instructional alignment between the cohorts. I talked about that with that Wednesday, how difficult it is to teach that group of kids on Monday, Tuesday, have a Wednesday to do a virtual day, and then try to do that again on Thursday and Friday is uniquely challenging. The nice part with the AB schedule is that there's less gaps. So right now, our teachers don't see their kids for 5 days. That's challenging. Whether we continue with the Wednesday face-to-face virtual, or if we move it to Friday, I think there's some more things we could be doing in terms of new learning happening on those days, so making that more robust. And then Kit, you pointed out that this model with having the virtual day on Friday could help with older siblings assisting with their elementary early release.
So the feedback that we have at the high school that we've talked a little bit more than Meyer Middle School is where Wednesday is placed, again, it's not allowing us to really be synchronous in that instruction. If the Wednesday is considered to be moving maybe at the start of term 2 to Fridays, it allows all of our students at the end of every week to actually have a meaningful and engaging lesson on the content that was taught. Everybody's ending on that week at the same point. The teacher can check and connect. The lesson plans can be delivered. We looked at putting it in an AM schedule. If you remember right now, we're currently serving our students roughly from about 11 o'clock through 3 o'clock. If we were to push it to an AM schedule, and again, I think from a district family standpoint, help some of those families out with the early releases of elementary age kids as well as an opportunity here. For us, our staff is really just does not, I shouldn't say they have a preference of one of those two options, but really they're more concerned about the Wednesday to Friday move so that we have continuous and meaningful instruction and having our cohorts on the same page instruction.
One of the challenges with the ABAB would be mitigation. So we had a student that was an early weeker, got symptoms late in the week, they traced back 2 days. We didn't have to do any contact tracing. Now, if that person was in school on Tuesday, that would have been a problem. So the ABAB creates that little bit of a challenge there with the mitigation. Any of these changes are going to impact parents' work schedules, possibly family schedules, so we're going to be mindful of that. And then one possible concern is are kids going to just tune out on Fridays, or parents going to take long weekends? Possibly. This next option, option 2, is maybe more of a transition as things maybe get better. And that would be where we'd have a group of students. For example, the first week, A through K would be in person 3 days a week. So there's no Wednesday or Friday distance learning day virtually with the teacher. And then that would rotate next week where students L through Z would be in 3 days a week. And then the A through K kids would be in 2 days a week. So there's obviously positives and challenges in terms of picking up instructional minutes is definitely a benefit. Face-to-face is always better. And then there's a series of concerns and challenges there. So when I surveyed staff, this is before Kit and I had a conversation today. This is my first part of my survey, and then I sent out a different one today, a little bit different. So you can see the options based on all the feedback. The majority of our teachers would still prefer the AABB model with that Wednesday distance learning day. But then today, I added this ABAB option, and then you can take a look at the results here. Still, I think leading the way would be the AABB distance learning on Wednesday, but a close second would be the AABB with distance learning on Friday, which is one of the options that I know your high school staff is looking into. So
I just want to make it clear for you as a board too, what the reason why we're talking in some of these reflections and adaptations is Mark and I are under the assumption, and I think all of us are, is that we still want to be in a face-to-face environment such as our hybrid is right now. And being realistic, we're not going to switch, hopefully, to a full day, 5 day anytime soon based on where our numbers are at. I hope we can get there at some particular point, but we're also very nervous equally about just being fully online. And so what we're trying to do is find our best little adjustments that we can make to enhance what we're already doing and just being transparent with you in that. I'd like, Mark, if you could go back just to option 2. Option 2 really, as Mark had said, is a transition. You just keep one more, yeah. That we really saw as an option where instead of our buildings going from hybrid form to just full 1,100 kids at the high school or 750 kids at the Meyer Middle School, that this would be a spot where we could put that in as a means of transition for 3 or 4 weeks to make sure we're all good and safe before we just, again, fully open up our doors to those 1,100 students. So our staff are very nervous at both building levels for this for the main reason of prep time. So right now with our Wednesdays, or if we were shifting to Fridays, this takes away that time, but we also know that there's part of that growth in getting back to a regular daily routine, and this allows us to do that to a partial extent.
And then this is the active link here, and I know Stacey, you asked the question about the burden on teachers. The feedback's pretty good here, so take some time to look at the positives and the negatives, and then some of the other ideas that teachers have in terms of hybrid. So I thought they did a good job with reflections. Yep. Oh, there you go.
So this is our team feedback as well too. So again, we both polled, Mark did it through a survey, we did it through conversation, both at our BLT level and at our building level. Again, they talk about Wednesday to Fridays being more instructionally sound and engaging lessons at that same pacing level. Our staff have really worked out what synchronous Wednesdays look like. I think now we want to take that next leap forward and make that meaningful and grow in that area. Our high school staff, for the most part, as a majority, prefers the ABAB format with the Monday through Thursday and Fridays on, but they're very comfortable staying in the AABB with Fridays as well, understanding that mitigation and safety is equally important related to that. The every other day, though, puts students in a better routine in the fact that right now we're finding some of the students on their digital e-lessons aren't really getting it done before they walk into class. This feels more like an instructional sequence where they have a digital day, a face-to-face day with some expectations, and a digital day. What we risk at that level, though, again, is the contact tracing and the true mitigation that we're able to do at that particular point. Well, again, we want to make this a 7-12 decision too, and both our buildings understand that there's compromise in those areas. And then again, we talked about the K-12 Fridays as maybe an unintended benefit or consequence from that. Questions or concerns that board members have?
This is really good, and I like your thinking on this. A couple things that occur to me. One is that we're learning as we go, right? And you're obviously very conscious of what's working and what isn't working. So at a certain point, if we were going to make a significant change, we would do it based on a administrative recommendation that we make some kind of significant change. And I think it goes without saying, but just as a board member, we need to be very conscious of our parents as well as the student learning. So we decided very early to go with the model we had. We decided way back in July to give parents a chance to plan. If we were to make a significant thing, even moving from Wednesday to Friday, which may make sense educationally, we can't just do that quickly unless it was an emergency. But notifying parents, allowing them to make the adjustment, all of that is important. And I think you're aware of that, but I think it's important for us to say it out here. We got to be conscious of that because it could leave some students really allergic. The other thing is, you're doing a lot of creative thinking on this and consulting the staff. I can't imagine this isn't going on in every other school district in the country right now. How does that inform where we're going? Do we even have a chance to learn? And has anybody even had a chance to share that yet? So I would hope that current and best practices, and as we make significant changes, would also, to the extent possible, be informed by what's working and what isn't elsewhere. I don't know how we get that. But
I think we made, hindsight, right? We absolutely made the right decision with the hybrid. I know I would much rather be in this situation, letting parents know early, than a lot of districts that have to pivot at this point. That'd be super hard to have that conversation and get everything in place for that to happen.
Okay, so I just want to go back to when we decided on the hybrid model, and I think that the reason why we were at the hybrid model for the AABB day was because that Wednesday was going to be a deep cleaning day or whatever, and it kind of sounds to me like we kind of have more of a handle on it. And so, and from different teachers' perspectives and student perspectives, that Wednesday day seems like to be the greatest burden, not only for the students and for the teachers. And I'd like to see us try and get our foot in the door to get more face-to-face instruction. And I'd really like to see how that could be a day that would be rotated to get kids back into the school face-to-face, because I think if we've learned one thing throughout this whole thing is how important it is to have a teacher in front of students. So, but then I was surprised to see that teachers aren't super in favor of that. But since that's not really a cleaning day anymore, I think that would be a positive thing to look at to get kids back in for more face-to-face instruction.
I get the sense with the AABB, without my staff just looking at the feedback, it has more to do with the mitigation part and the safety for the staff right now at this point.
Sure.
I would absolutely face-to-face is the way to go, but just reading some of the comments from our staff, I think that's the sense that I'm getting is more have to do with that image I shared today, the balancing of mitigation versus learning versus safety, all those things. So.
Yep.
ahead.
The question I had is kind of along the same lines, Amy. I was surprised to see, I think it said the 2-week option was where it would be essentially you're in 3 days a week, out 2 days, and then the next week you're in for 2, out for 3. It was surprising, I think, to me that the staff, other than the prep time, but would it eliminate when you talk about the 3 or the 4, different style or different types of teaching that they're having to do? Would it eliminate any of those? It wouldn't eliminate any of it.
No, because they'd still be responsible for teaching digital lessons while the other kids are in face-to-face.
Okay.
They'd still be responsible for the kid who's out close contact.
Yep.
So for them, the time is the most important thing right now, just like elementary. Time for prep and time to deliver in those multiple models is, I think, what stresses them the most when they start seeing that transition back. They know how to teach in a 5-day week format with everybody here, but to do that impartially still without any extra time is really, really difficult.
Sure, that makes sense. Yeah, I guess I just, in my mind, when I first heard something like that, I thought, oh, well, that eliminates, at least one of the ways that they're having to deliver. But if it doesn't do that necessarily, the only thing it might eliminate is the same as switching to Friday, is not having that weird Wednesday where half have been in and half haven't been in. So I guess I was a little bit more optimistic. Something like that might be, hey, we can get the kids in more face-to-face, and there's also one less way for the teachers to have to worry about delivering, but it doesn't sound like that's the case.
I just want to come back to the cleaning thing too. I'm not joking, I want to make this clear, but they have become more efficient in all of our buildings in terms of that. They've actually purchased some other equipment too that they're able to do bathrooms in a far quicker and more efficient manner. What's happening is vacuuming gets done on that deep cleaning day. So what we're doing now is pushing little things like vacuuming off into those days, but we're really doing a great job on the disinfecting and deep cleaning of the building from a mitigation standpoint. Joe and his team and the custodians, I can't thank them enough.
That's great, thank you. I have 2 questions, and the first one has to do with, I want to understand the challenge about contact tracing, if we were to change the model. So would it mean that it's primarily, the contact tracing would be more complicated if we did A, B, or whatever, because of a teacher's exposure, right?
It's actually, so when we have a student who shows symptoms, we have, when the moment of symptoms are there, we go back 48 hours. That typically then is 2 days. So if we have a student with symptoms that was sick in our current model on Tuesday, or didn't know they were, but showed symptoms on Thursday or Friday, we're not, in some cases, not even having to trace back if the student shows symptoms on Saturday. But if they show symptoms with any moment of 48 hours that they would be in our building, we're tracing every one of those particular students through. So when you bring them in on an every other day format, and the student shows symptoms midweek, whereas if they were out of our building, it creates a concern for the Monday and potentially the other days that they would be in on the Wednesday.
But they would still be in on the day of their cohort, so it would be expanding the teachers. They would have, right? That would be more teachers.
Teachers would have, I would say, greater exposure because it's every other day, right?
But it would be the same. It would be in the same cohort as their peers.
Correct.
It's the 5-day gap.
It's the 5-day gap that helps us or protects us.
No.
So just as much as it hurts us instructionally, it protects our staff and our students from more further mitigation or contraction through that. So again,
So the symptomatic person then ultimately test positive, we have to track back days. So if by luck, it happens in that 5-day gap, then we don't have to do any tracing because they actually never were in school because it was during that 5-day gap. For all the reasons why you want to go AB for instruction, it eliminates that 5-day gap.
Where you haven't been in school.
So it's just the lesser of 2 evils.
Still, but you're going to have to trace those kids. More chance that you're going to be traced as a contact in school in an AB model versus AB.
correct.
But
No, there is.
I think to Stacy's point, though, it doesn't expand. It can't expand the number of people that person can have exposure to.
Correct.
It just,
Expand the risk
Right,
there.
but
yeah.
it means you have to just undertake contact tracing potentially more often because
Correct.
you don't have the 5 days in between where that could have been counted. as you did at home. Okay, thank you. The other question I have goes back, Kit, to your talking about, if I'm doing my assignment and I'm stuck on the first geometry problem, I just can't go on. Is there anything we can do to help that?
So our
to
teachers are reaching out and
frustration?
our kids are reaching out to our teachers. They're doing a masterful job with it, the best they can on that prep that they have. We have, again, so we allow students to come in that do not have internet connections. We've begun to allow students to come into this library to make up a test. The reality still is though, is that because they're in a different cohort, we're not bringing them down to Mrs. Johnson's classroom to get that extra help or that assistance because she's still teaching.
Right.
So we're still struggling with a level of supports for some of our students that are struggling in the digital days and trying to find that. One of the things that we've discussed, but we didn't feel it rose to the level yet is, again, we had office hours last year in that, and some of our staff have worked really well for, and others it didn't work so well from a proactive standpoint. But we're trying to find ways for our staff to still develop an opportunity for them to be available. But our teachers are doing that now, regrettably, at 8 o'clock at night and 9 o'clock at night. They're on 24/7, and that's one of the things that's burning them out. And so we're trying to find, again, whether it's the Wednesdays or the Fridays, how they're touching base with kids. But again, as to our point before, it's 3 and 4 and 5 days past where the student was frustrated, and we're still trying to find ways to work with that student.
That's the thing. And, you know, I'm thinking about that we're providing tutors for eSchool. I recognize overall, you can have one tutor that can really help with K-6 in a way that you can't if you're talking about specialized areas. So I get that, but I'm concerned about those kids because if we could catch them early,
Right.
before frustration sets in. I'm not telling you anything you don't know. I guess I'm saying, I know it sounds like it's something that would cost money, but sometimes we have to spend money.
One thing that we're looking at middle school is getting an after-school tutor, so they can, with office hours, so they can either come in face-to-face or virtually for students to help. Right now, like I said, brand new curriculum, it's more rigorous,
Oh.
kids are frustrated,
Yeah,
and they're only face-to-face 80 minutes, so providing a tutor after school for an hour, 2 hours, I don't know, but it would cost money, but I think it would be, especially in math, where content builds on each other,
right.
I think it'd be really beneficial.
Well, sometimes if we spend money right now, it saves us money down the line.
We have our 2 interventionists back, so one was on paternity leave and the other was just in their first semester. So during focus for us, beginning in 2 weeks, we will have an option where those people can get, or where our students can get extra help in both language arts and in mathematics. We just have been building everything else on the ground up and now finally we're going to be able to implement that program.
Is there any chance, and I suppose it's limited, but is there any chance that a student who is in calculus could virtually help some of these kids doing geometry?
Possible. I can tell you from my own son who's taking calculus, he's extremely stressed as it is on all the other courses they're taking, that, again, they're managing these different learning environments too, that wouldn't say that some kids wouldn't volunteer to help, but right now they're helping each other in calculus, or they're helping each other in other classes the best they can through the networking that they have on their off days.
So that would be an interesting thing to expand on in terms of the class of students. I mean, there are some kids who are just naturally good at being able to connect with the students in their class, and there are other kids who aren't as good at that. To help those kids who aren't as good figure out a way of tapping into the resources of their peers. But I understand it's an easy thing to say and much more complicated to do.
So our intention was to give you an update and to show you this in early October, as Alan had said. We're still building consensus, talking with our staff, discussing minor adjustments and pivots along the way, and we're going to keep you informed week to week.
Well, I appreciate it, and I especially like the idea of a step-by-step building up. And I understand, as Ellen said, that we need to keep families informed. On the other hand, I would hate to neglect an appropriate learning strategy just because we feel as if we don't have so many weeks to be able to inform people. I think that people are waiting for changes. So,
thank you.
All right, thank you. So that really covers B and C, correct?
Yep.
All right, so now we're going to move on to action items, and the first one, that's in Europe.
It's true.
Excuse me, weekly update.
Dashboard in
info. It's St. Croix dashboard. Pierce County. That notable grade piece there where we had that spike of concern a couple weeks back. UW numbers are down. Same over. We were not looking good, and again, I guess I used the words last week. None of these are necessarily numbers to write home about, but it's moving in a better direction than it was at one point at its peak. Accelerated spread according to the Harvard model. I moved the arrows that have been on previous slides here to not keep the focus for tonight on the total positives, but to redirect our attention to this positivity rate. That's a low number. Pointing the same thing out down here. That's a good thing. University. And again, they've put together some pretty comprehensive plans as they transition students back. Harvard model. This is Pierce County. St. Croix's higher. St. Croix, I didn't show both on here, but next slide will illustrate. That's supposed to be the Pierce County represented in the orange, whereas, just to be clear, I didn't put a separate slide up that says St. Croix is and under the Harvard model, higher. Minnesota link or model, as we've illustrated in the past. We try to keep an eye on positivity rates. You'll see, you'll see here, a little higher as I point out in St. Croix. This is one of those fairly new additions to the Pierce County website, indicating all of the schools in Pierce County. Next slide, I show where we're at in relation to all of those other schools. Where are we at? And here's kind of the deep dive breakdown. So again, staff absences under the quarantine umbrella, staff who are not able to work because they've been identified as having close contact with someone that has been confirmed positive, that's 12. Isolation, staff not able to work because they're seeking COVID diagnosis or a member of their household is. And then the positives, the highlighted bold here, just to clarify, mixing apples and oranges maybe a little bit, but I want to really point this out. This is the total number reflected here because we're using this word snapshot. This really is not a snapshot. This really is staff currently positive, active, and or tested positive, but some of them have returned to work. We're reporting that to you in total. Students, 41 are out due to COVID symptoms, either being tested or following public health guidance. 27 are out due to household members having symptoms or waiting test results. And the big number of 154 out to being close contact has much to do with this last week where we had 2 instances in a row there that caused a lot of close contacts within our football program. And under our Pierce County guidance, we just basically said, we need to send you all home. We got to play it safe. We need to follow the same plan that we have under our classroom mitigation efforts. We need to follow the same protocols as we've been doing since the beginning of the year. So obviously that's a big number right now. Those students, by the way, well, I'll finish. Fewer than 10 students tested positive, or some have returned to school. Similar as I was pointing out here, showing in totals. Some of them have recovered and they're back at school. back to this, the football issue, I just want to kind of go on record to say that right now, the plan is, I gotta use my cheat sheet here just to make sure I'm referencing the dates correctly. The return of the vast majority of football players, although Kit alluded to the fact that there's some tweaking going on now, but the return of the majority of those football players will occur, I forget the date.
October 21st will be their first day back.
On our schedule, we would typically be scheduled to play Hudson then a couple days later on Friday. They've agreed that they would play the game on Saturday to give our football team an opportunity to get in a couple of practices at least. And then, if all went well and we didn't have growing concerns either within football team COVID issues, community, test positivity rates in the county, all the other things that we look at. This board, our district, has been careful to not say, here is one rubric that we are going to commit ourselves to, because we feel like there's a variety of factors that can influence what the numbers might look like. One example of that would be the big spike that occurred at the university. We talked about how, let's not fool ourselves, they're not several miles away, they're in our front yard, that's a concern. But the big spike in the Pierce County numbers were in part driven at that time by that issue at the university. And so let's not just go by some magical formula that's tied directly to a Pierce County dashboard, when in fact there could be some other things that we should be looking at. Right now, regarding football, I would not be recommending that we just shut down football, season's over. We saw enough last week that it caused us this great concern. There are a total of, I believe, 93 football players in our football program. There's 13 coaches in our football program. Puts us up to well over 100 people affected, and the limited number of test positive cases that we have cause us to say, let's not push the panic button, let's not push the alarm. Ask me tomorrow, the story could be different. Ask me next week, the story could be different. But for now, what we know right now today, we are not recommending to the board that we just cancel football for the year. We'll see. So I guess I would ask for the board's opinion on that approach. Are there concerns with that? We all had some level of concerns when this board made a decision of whether or not we were even going to go with fall sports or not to begin with. To be clear, our coaching staff and our athletes have truly done the mitigation efforts that they were asked to do in that football program. We believe, although it's hard to sometimes prove, but we don't believe that what we're seeing is a spread that was caused by or initiated at the football field in back of this high school. That the people affected that have tested positive, probably the result of that is that they contracted the virus not while out back on the football field. So I'm bringing all of that up just to recognize one thing that we don't want to do is attach a stigma to the football program to suggest that this whole thing is going to blow up in our face or has already blown up in our face because we took that risk with football and all other sports. And until there are other factors that cause us to take a different approach, we don't feel at this point in time, standing before you tonight, that it would warrant the cancellation of the entire football season. Again, we'll see what tomorrow brings and what next week brings. So feedback from the board on that?
I'm generally in support. I think it would be curious to see, if there's a lag time and all of a sudden 2 cases or 3 cases becomes 15, then my level of concern changes. And the question I would have, and I don't recall this, and it's maybe more a question for Raleigh, so if you don't know the answer, that's fine, but there was something about if they didn't play a certain percentage of the season, and 40% sticks in my head, that they could choose to basically say, we're stopping before we get to that point. We want to go to the spring. Just give me a reference on if they come back so a week from Wednesday is the 21st and they play that Saturday. Is that their last game at that point, or do they have, the schedule goes on beyond that?
We rescheduled 2 other games.
Oh, okay.
That we missed, so potentially both with Menominee and Richmond, who's also in the Big Rivers Conference.
Okay.
There are 2 makeup weeks because we did not schedule non-conference games. So Raleigh has worked with his ADs in that particular area to make that safe.
Okay.
The other part of your comment of if 15 or more students now were seated that might be on the football team, that was why we were overly cautious, to put it very bluntly, in really putting a large wet blanket on the entire football program. With all of our student athletes now out and being quarantined and following that quarantine guideline, it's our hopes that, again, they come back extremely healthy, they come back that they have not had any issues since they've been out, and that we're able to have a safe startup again. And we have to have a safe startup with a fair number of days prior to a competition according to WI regulations too, and it fits into that. So we discussed all of those last week, and the fact that, we were discussing everything from, at first they're shocked with that, right? That you have all of a sudden have student athletes that are out, and then once we started getting guidance from DHS and others, we felt like we had a very good plan in place to keep our student athletes safe, but most importantly, as a building principal, to keep our doors open for school first too as well.
Yeah.
And making sure we have our priorities aligned and that we appreciate all the activities outside of what our school offers, but our main priority is to still have kids educated in our building. And I would stand firm that that's our decision that we're making moving forward in that. So we had a lot of people that were not happy about it, but we're doing it for the right reasons for all of our kids, not just football players in general, but all of our students.
Yeah.
So the quick recap would be, last week, we were scheduled to play Menominee. That's rescheduled. This week we were scheduled to play New Richmond.
Correct.
Rescheduled.
Okay.
Hudson is
Pushing a day for us.
pushing a day, so there would be potentially 3 games remaining, and then wait and see what the postseason may or may not look like.
I didn't know what the chances of having those games rescheduled would look like. So I thought if you're coming back just to finish up that last 5 days, maybe it makes more sense to take 3 games in the spring, and get another half season. But if you're able to reschedule it, then it looks like you're kind of getting that just at the back end of the fall now.
Pieces fell perfectly on the football side, but more importantly, they're falling just right to keep our kids safe and our building open here at the high school.
Yeah, I want to restate, and I appreciate you brought it up, Kit, just so that there aren't some misunderstandings either with the board or anybody listening at home, that, we have our priorities in the right place. Our priorities are to mitigate COVID, take every measure that we can to stop the spread, while at the same time trying to balance that with the social, emotional, physical, and academic needs of our kids. That's what comes first. Football is secondary to our main purpose of being an educational institution. So let no one think that I just want to be transparent about the football issue and not let this meeting end tonight without having some dialogue about it. But hopefully you heard the majority of tonight's meeting had more to do with academic interests than anything.
Yeah, I think all of that makes sense. The only thing that would probably change the way I feel about it is if we felt like bringing those 90 kids and 13 coaches back together 3 weeks from now would cause a potential chance that it could impact the school again, I think that would be hard, but otherwise I'm in support of that plan.
I'm wondering, do we know how many other students or staff outside of the football program this scenario impacted as far as being out of school?
Yeah, they had to do contact tracing to the same extent in the classroom as was with football. I don't know.
Less than 15 total students with the contact of student being symptomatic while here in attendance at school. The other students were not in attendance at school in that, and that quite frankly, again, saved us with some of the cohorting that we have in place. So only one of our positive tests was in school and thought there were seasonal allergies, which then we traced back and had that. On average, it's 2 to 3 student contacts per block on average, which gives us less than 15 in most cases.
Back to the benefits of the hybrid and the 5-day window that help to reduce those numbers.
So none of our late cohort kids in this case, because of where it was found and things, were impacted by that. In that first half of the week, it was only our first half of the alphabet where we had that one symptomatic student because the other students were out that didn't know that they were a positive test at the time. And again, that protects our students in our cohorts in that model.
So 2 things. First of all, I think as we all know, it was a complicated decision to go forward with high-risk sports anyway. But at this point, I don't hear anything personally that would cause me to shift from that decision. Now, that doesn't mean I'm not going to hear something in a couple days or next week, but at this point, I would support, Jamie, your administrative recommendation that we stay the course on football. It also occurs to me as if it wouldn't take too long, it would be a really interesting thing just to generalize. If we were in an ABAB, how many more kids would we have had to contact because of this? Because if we could generally figure it out without taking too much time to do it, it would be an interesting thing to know.
30 to 45 more.
Additional students would have to be out.
Because we had, again, 2 in the other cohort, and if you were to, again, average that each student has contact or right around tracing with 15 students within that, including one, so it would be about 15 per positive student that we're averaging on essence. So we had 15 with the first cohort. If we have 2 in the late cohort, that would be about another 30 more students.
Who would be?
Give or take.
That would be out then for 2.
I'm just, again, ballparking based on the averages.
Yeah, well, that's what I asked you to do.
5 or 6 tracing.
So two of the cases that you said were in the later that you didn't have to
We
necessarily
did not have contact in the school.
in the school. Yeah.
Correct.
Okay.
So this, again, I've got to, I keep stating the obvious, but I have no problem with the common sense approach you're using on this, and we'll understand that it's a day-by-day thing. But I also know that it's not the only sport we have, nor the only sport that's going to be happening. So for all of us to be conscious of the fact that what we're doing with football right now and how we're treating them is somewhat precedent setting for what we're going to do for same kinds of things happen to other sports currently going on, or that may happen in the winter and spring. We don't know yet, but we just don't want a situation where somebody said, well, you let football do this and we can't. I don't know how you reconcile all that, but I can tell you every parent in the district is going to be watching that. So I get it. I have no objection with what you're doing right now. We need to monitor this and also realize that it affects everything and other extracurricular activities outside of sports as well. So we aren't treating football any differently than we would any other sport.
Football has done a masterful job in mitigating just like all of our activities and even our clubs and other things. And we treated it honestly as a good wake-up call for everybody in our building, both for our students and for our staff. We talked honestly with our students about what they still do on the weekends or where they're at and all those different things, not just football, not just soccer or the other things that are going on in marching band. It was a good wake-up call for our building community at the high school to make sure 2 things are occurring, that we continue to follow all of our physical distancing, masking, and washing hands, and very much so treat it seriously, because again, we're seeing those numbers increase, and I think that wake-up call is heard loud and clear by our student body and by our families here at River Falls High School, for sure.
That's good. And I also think, though, that we have to be a bit cautious when we say that it's precedent setting, because my assumption is that this board, when faced with other decisions about winter sports, are going to be making it based upon the merits of the situation at hand. And we're not going to approve something simply because we approve high-risk sports in the fall. So I think that's really important for us to keep track of.
I think that's a good point. What I want to protect us from is somebody saying, you let football do that, or you didn't let football do that. You know, it's just, unless there's a really good reason why there's other circumstances or whatnot.
And we are, I know, Ellen, you've asked for about when fall sports, it's coming in an upcoming
Winter.
agenda. It just wasn't the right time tonight.
Yeah.
I keep saying that, winter sports.
Yeah.
Still, it feels like it should be summer or something.
Stacy, I have a quick
Yep.
comment. So I'm generally not in favor of doing a whole lot of group things right now, which I've been clear about from the beginning. But given the fact that we are, I'm glad that we're not jumping to a response that would create a stigma around this. This is a super stealth virus, right? Anybody can get it from anything, even if you do everything right. So I'm glad that we're taking that approach. With this particular thing. I hope that there's, with any school sanctioned things, any school sanctioned events or clubs or organizations or activities or whatever, that we know who the adult is that's accountable to make sure that we are following the mitigation response. If we're doing that and there's an accountability piece and things like this happen and we can't come back afterwards and say, get pictures of football players hanging out or whatever activity hanging out, not doing mitigation efforts and going, see, right? I don't want to be in that position. But if there's an accountability piece to this, we know where that is in these clubs and orgs, and we take a really strong stance on that, because if this gets passed because we're not following those things, that's a deal breaker for me, and that activity is done. So there's a lot of personal accountability in that for me, but given this situation and the details that you talked about, it makes sense to do what you're doing.
I agree. Anything else?
Nope.
All right. So propose or suggest items for future meeting agendas. We already know that we have winter sports conversation coming up at some point. We will be talking about changes for the WASB convention. Anything else? All right, the next meeting, we will meet Finance and Facilities. We'll meet Monday, October 19th at 6. There will be a regular Board of Education meeting on Monday, October 19th, starting at 6:30. A special Board of Education meeting on Monday, October 26th at 6 o'clock. There will be an education program meeting on Monday, November 2nd at 6 o'clock, right here in River Falls High School. And with that, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Yeah. Question for you. Do the teachers have an idea of how to use Wednesday?